May 1942, Air Marshal Arthur Harris calculated that Bomber Command possessed 416 operational aircraft, roughly 40% of what strategic bombing doctrine claimed necessary to meaningfully impact German industrial capacity. Recent raids averaged 200 bombers per night, producing minimal measurable damage while sustaining 5% casualty rates. The Butt report demonstrated that only 30% of bombs fell within 5 miles of their targets. Britain's bombing campaign, consuming massive resources for negligible strategic effect, faced political extinction unless Harris could demonstrate overwhelming capability immediately. The solution required violating every operational doctrine Bomber Command had established. Harris proposed assembling 1,000 bombers for a single night's attack, a force 2.5 times larger than any previous operation. This would require stripping training units of aircraft, deploying inexperienced crews on operational missions, and risking Britain's entire bomber training infrastructure in one night. The mathematics were stark. Lose 100-plus aircraft and Britain's ability to train new crews collapses entirely. Achieve acceptable losses and demonstrate strategic bombing's viability. There was no middle ground. The force composition revealed everything about British bomber production in May 1942. Of 1,047 aircraft eventually assembled, 602 were Vickers Wellingtons, the twin-engine medium bomber that equipped the bulk of Bomber Command since 1938. Only 73 were Avro Lancasters, the 4-engine heavy bomber that represented the future. Britain's strategic bombing capability rested almost entirely on an aircraft designed to 1932 specifications, now obsolete by modern standards, yet irreplaceable in practical terms. The Wellington's prominence wasn't strategic preference, it was production reality. Britain manufactured Wellingtons at 3 factories: Weybridge, 70 per month; Broughton, 130 per month; Blackpool, 102 per month. Peak 1942. Production 300 to 2 Wellingtons monthly. Lancaster production approximately 80 per month across multiple facilities. Britain possessed operational Wellingtons because Britain could build Wellingtons faster than Germany could destroy them. That arithmetic dictated everything. The Wellington's design originated with Wallis's geodetic airframe construction, a basket-weave lattice of aluminum strips covered with doped fabric. This structure demonstrated extraordinary damage tolerance. Wellington S routinely returned from missions with massive framework sections missing, fabric burned away, entire control surfaces destroyed. The geodetic construction distributed loads across multiple members, meaning single component failures rarely caused catastrophic structural collapse. Crews reported Wellingtons surviving hits that would destroy conventional monocoque aircraft. This resilience came with manufacturing costs. Each Wellington required skilled workers to assemble thousands of individual geodetic components into precise alignment. The complexity prevented rapid production scaling. Adding workers didn't proportionally increase output because component fitting demanded experienced hands. A single Wellington consumed approximately 60 man-hours of skilled labor. By 1942 standards, this represented manageable but not trivial manufacturing commitment. Compare Wellington economics to alternatives. Lancaster production required approximately 55,000 man-hours per aircraft, over 900 times more labor than a Wellington. Each Lancaster cost approximately £58,000 versus roughly £20,000 per Wellington. Lancasters carried £14,000 bomb loads versus Wellington's £4,500, 3.1 times greater payload. But Britain manufactured 3.8 Wellingtons for every Lancaster. The exchange rate favoured quantity over capability because training bottlenecks prevented Britain from sustaining heavy bomber losses while maintaining crew generation. Operation Millennium's force structure reflected these constraints brutally. The 602 Wellingtons represented aircraft Harris could afford to lose. Each Wellington carried 5 crew versus Lancaster's 7. Wellington replacement cost £20,000. Lancaster replacement £58,000. If German defences destroyed 10% of the attacking force, 100-plus aircraft, losing Wellingtons meant £2 million in aircraft losses. Losing equivalent Lancasters, £5.8 million, plus catastrophic training programme impact from losing 700 trained heavy bomber crew. Harris assembled his force through systematic resource stripping. Operational squadrons contributed 416 aircraft. Operational training units provided 367 aircraft, flying classrooms stripped of training equipment and crewed by instructor pilots plus advanced students. Some OTU crews included pilots with fewer than 50 total flight hours. Harris knowingly sent partially trained crews on a mission where 5% losses represented acceptable casualties. The calculation was cold: demonstrate strategic bombing viability or watch the entire program cancelled. Some crew deaths now versus program extinction, and Germany winning the strategic air campaign. The 49 aircraft crewed entirely by student pilots represented the most desperate measures. These crews averaged 30 to 40 hours in type, barely enough for basic proficiency, completely insufficient for combat operations. Harris gambled that bomber stream tactics would reduce individual aircraft vulnerability enough that even inexperienced crews might survive. If losses concentrated among experienced crews, Britain's training infrastructure collapses. If losses distributed randomly, student crews die, but training capability survives. Either outcome was catastrophically expensive. Both were preferable to strategic bombing's political death. The bomber stream tactical innovation addressed fundamental defensive mathematics. German night fighters operated in defensive boxes. Controllers could direct maximum 6 interceptions per hour. Flak batteries could engage limited targets simultaneously. Traditional RAF doctrine dispersed bombers across 4-hour attack windows, allowing German defences to systematically engage each aircraft. The bomber stream concentrated 1,047 aircraft into 90-minute windows, generating target densities German defences couldn't process. Flak crews faced 15-plus targets per engagement cycle. Night fighter controllers watched helplessly as dozens of bombers flew through their sectors while they engaged 6. The 30 to 31 May timing was weather-dependent but strategically calculated. Full moon provided navigation advantages. Crews could identify terrain features visually. Cologne's position near the Rhine made it impossible to miss. Follow the river until massive urban area appears. Drop bombs. GEE-equipped aircraft, approximately 30% of the force, used radio navigation to mark the target with incendiaries, creating visible aiming points for non-GEE aircraft. The system's crude effectiveness didn't require precision. Concentrate 1,455 tons of bombs in a dense urban area within 90 minutes, and fires overwhelm firefighting capacity regardless of individual accuracy. 1,047 aircraft departed British airfields between 22:30 and 23:30 on 30 May. The stream stretched 70 miles long at staggered altitudes, minimizing collision risk, heading toward Cologne. 868 aircraft claimed successful bombing runs, 83% of the force. German defences engaged frantically. 41 aircraft were destroyed, 16 by flak, 4 by night fighters, 2 in mid-air collision, remaining from various causes. The 3.9% loss rate fell below Harris's anticipated 5% threshold. The damage statistics captured international attention immediately. British reconnaissance documented approximately 13,000 buildings destroyed, 6,000 seriously damaged, 22,000 lightly damaged. 36 factories completely destroyed, 70 factories suffering 50 to 80% damage, 222 smaller facilities damaged. Over 2,500 separate fires reported, 1,700 classified as large, 45,000 people rendered homeless. Civilian deaths, 469, remarkably low given the destruction scale, testament to effective German civil defense shelters. The strategic impact proved far more complex than damage statistics suggested. Cologne's industrial production recovered within weeks. German authorities relocated machinery, repaired facilities, rerouted supply chains. The bombing inflicted temporary disruption, not permanent destruction. German armaments production continued rising throughout 1942, despite increasing bombing campaigns. By traditional strategic bombing metrics, destroying enemy production capacity, Operation Millennium achieved minimal long-term effect. Yet Harris accomplished his actual objective: demonstrate that overwhelming force could saturate German defences, achieve concentrated destruction, and sustain acceptable losses. The propaganda value was immense. British newspapers proclaimed the 1,000-bomber raid proof of RAF's striking power. Churchill telegraphed Roosevelt, "I hope you were pleased with our mass air attack. There is plenty more to come." Harris secured political backing and resource allocation for continued strategic bombing operations. The cost accounting revealed uncomfortable truths. Britain lost 41 aircraft worth approximately £920,000 combined, predominantly Wellingtons at £20,000 each, plus handful of more expensive types. 300+ aircrew killed. The bombing inflicted perhaps £15 to £20 million in immediate structural damage, German reconstruction costs, but destroyed minimal strategic production capacity. The return on investment, measured purely in destroyed German industrial output, approached zero. Measured in strategic leverage, the calculation reversed entirely. Operation Millennium forced Germany to massively expand air defense investments, pulling resources from other fronts. By late 1942, Germany deployed 900,000 personnel in air defense roles, thousands of anti-aircraft guns that could have been used against Soviet armor, and substantial fighter production dedicated to homeland defense. Every German fighter defending Cologne was a fighter unavailable in North Africa or the Eastern Front. The bombing forced defensive resource allocation that weakened German offensive capability elsewhere. The Wellingtons' dominance of the raid, 600 to 2 of 1,047 aircraft, 57.5% of total force, demonstrated Britain's fundamental strategic constraint. The ideal bomber force would be all Lancasters, greater payload, longer range, better survivability. Britain couldn't build Lancasters fast enough. The compromise: deploy adequate aircraft available in quantity, Wellingtons, rather than perfect aircraft available in scarcity, Lancasters. This became the pattern for the entire bombing campaign. By October 1943, Wellingtons exited frontline bomber operations entirely, replaced by Lancaster/Halifax heavy bomber streams. But throughout 1940 to 1943, Wellingtons flew more operational sorties than any other bomber command type. They equipped more squadrons, dropped more bombs, and sustained more losses because Britain manufactured them in volume sufficient to sustain operations while the heavy bomber fleet slowly expanded. The Wellington was never the best bomber available. It was the best bomber available in necessary quantities when Britain needed it most. The strategic bombing campaign's final accounting remains contested. Britain expended approximately £2.8 billion on bomber operations 1939 to 1945, roughly 7% of total war expenditure. German industrial production peaked in 1944, despite years of intensive bombing. Yet Germany deployed massive resources defending against bombing that otherwise would have fought elsewhere. The bombing diverted German fighters, flak guns, radar systems, personnel, and industrial capacity into defensive rather than offensive employment. Whether this justified the cost depends entirely on whether one measures direct damage inflicted or opportunity costs forced upon the enemy. Operation Millennium established the template: mass raids, overwhelming defenses through volume, accepting losses that traditional doctrine considered catastrophic, and measuring success through strategic leverage rather than tactical destruction. The Wellington force, obsolescent, moderately capable, produced in overwhelming quantity, enabled the campaign's continuation until heavy bombers achieved sufficient production to sustain operations independently. The geodetic design that made Wellingtons extraordinarily damage-resistant also made them difficult to produce rapidly. That complexity limited production scaling but enabled operations that otherwise would have been unsustainable. The trade-off worked because Britain needed bombers that survived long enough to train replacement crews, not bombers that achieved perfection in every mission. Adequate aircraft in quantity defeated superior aircraft in scarcity through simple attrition mathematics. Wars aren't won by perfect equipment available when convenient. They're won by adequate equipment available when necessary, deployed in sufficient volume that enemy defenses become irrelevant through saturation. The Wellington force that dominated Operation Millennium represented that principle perfectly. Not the best bomber imaginable, but the best bomber achievable, given Britain's production constraints and resource limitations. That proved sufficient because strategic bombing's real value wasn't destroying German factories. It was forcing Germany to defend against attacks that consumed resources more valuable than anything the bombing destroyed. The Wellingtons didn't win through excellence. They won through persistence, volume, and forcing Germany to fight a resource war it couldn't afford to win.